For those of you who haven't seen Cy ten Brugge and Kate's website, proofThatGodExists.org, it is a great example of presuppositionalism at work. It tries to prove God's existence with a questionnaire, and as you would expect, it fails miserably. So here's the first page, and it wants me to take a position on whether absolute truth exists. And by absolute truth, they mean true for all people at all times everywhere. Well, there's really only one thing that I'm pretty much convinced is true, and that's that I am having an experience. Specifically, I'm having an experience of looking at this stupid website. Now, I don't know the underlying nature of my experience. I don't know if it is hallucinatory, delusional, a really vivid dream, or whatever else, but one thing I don't know how to doubt is that it is an experience I am having. Which, by the way, is how empirical science looks at the world. It only describes experiences and makes predictions about experiences. I don't know if the fact that I'm having an experience is something you can say is true for all people everywhere, if it is something that only occurs in my own mind, but let's say that yes, this is an absolute truth. Okay, so the next page wants me to confirm or deny whether I know something to be true. I think I've covered this. I believe that I know it to be true that I'm having some kind of experience. So does logic exist? Well, it seems to exist in my experience, at least. Logic says, for example, that you can't think of something existing and not existing in the same way and at the same time, and I find that when I try to think of that, I find that I've always been unsuccessful in doing so. So that seems to be about right. I'll say logic exists. Does logic change? Well, that I don't really think I can answer. Maybe tomorrow the rules of logic will be different, but there's no option for I don't know if logic changes. Alright, well, as far as I can remember, I've never seen logic change, so let's assume it doesn't. Okay, here at the top it says, is logic made of matter or is it abstract? Well, I think in a sense it's both. Matter is material, of course, but logic is a computational pattern or process undertaken by matter. Without the matter, the process can't occur. It's an abstraction that can't have any reality without the matter, so we'll say that it's made of matter. Matter changes or matter does not change? Well, as far as I can tell, it looks like matter occasionally changes. Okay, so it wants me to answer this question again. I said that matter changes, but that logic does not, but also that logic is made of matter, and this website claims that that's a contradiction. Well, no, it's not. As I said, logic is a pattern or a process. Matter that is arranged in a pattern can change without the pattern itself changing. For example, my fingerprints are a pattern, but my fingerprints are also made of matter. They say that every 10 years or so, every molecule in your body gets replaced. The matter making up my fingerprints now is entirely different than it was 10 years ago. Does that mean my fingerprints now don't match the fingerprints I had then? No. Similarly, matter undergoing the computational process we call logic can change without the process itself changing. The matter doing logic can change, but the logic that it is doing does not. So I can't really get past this part because it doesn't give you all of the real options, so let's just skip to the end. So this part says, truth, knowledge, and logic are necessary to prove anything and cannot be made sense of apart from God. Okay, two things. First of all, logic is not necessary to prove that I am having an experience. Maybe my experience is an illusory one, maybe it's a hallucination, but the fact that I am having it is not something I doubt or even know how to doubt. I don't even know how I could be skeptical of that. I don't need logic to know that. I'm not deducing or inferring that I'm having an experience. It's immediately apparent. Secondly, why would I need God to know that I'm having an experience? I can understand the assertion that if you want to be sure that your experiences match some kind of reality that exists independent of those experiences, then you would need a means of accessing that reality, which mortal human beings do not have, as far as I can tell. I can understand the argument that you would need God to be sure your experiences are real. But why do you need God to know that you're having an experience in the first place? How could I possibly be mistaken about what my own thoughts are? Why do I need God to be certain of that? This is not something that I simply refuse to doubt. This is something I don't even know how to doubt. I don't have the first clue how to be skeptical of that. So here's the last page. The proof that God exists is that without him you couldn't prove anything. Well, I guess that depends on what you mean by prove. If you mean that I can't know anything to be true outside of my own experience, I agree. But I don't claim to know whether my beliefs are true in that sense. The only thing I do know is true is that I am thinking and having experiences. But why do I need God to know that? And even if God does exist and he is sending us revelations of truth, that doesn't really solve the problem of human fallibility. It is still fallible human beings that have to discern true revelations from things that just look like true revelations. Since you are fallible, how can you be sure that what you think is a revelation from God is not just an illusion? Sure, maybe God doesn't make mistakes, but you still do. When you believe that one religion is true and the others are not, how can you be sure you're not mistaken?